Welcome, everyone, to the Co-Creators Convergence Thursday Night Creator Convo. I'm Noel Marshall, and I'm here with my beloved.
Hi, everyone. This is Bob Warner. We're so delighted to have our brother Byron with us this evening to explain the Urantia book to us. Thank you. I'm going to listen to this as if for the first time. Really appreciate your time, Byron, and look forward to conversation and Q&A with everyone with their inquisitive minds as we have an opportunity this evening. Thank you for being here, everyone.
Thank you all for coming. And Byron, before I introduce you, Byron Belitsos, I am going to tell everyone a little bit about the Co-Creators Convergence, as well as the amazing guests, just like you. We're so esteemed and honored that you decided to spend this evening with us. And I'll tell them about others that we have coming up. So if everyone would just please stand by. So that's a little bit about the Co-Creators Convergence. And our mentor, Marx Hubbard, who you will learn Byron is very familiar with. I don't know if you have your book handy that you edited, Marx Hubbard. I looked for my book, Birth 2012, that you published for Marx Hubbard. We're all part of the Birth 2012 movement with Stephen Dinan. But I'm going to move on here and give the formal vita here for Byron, because he has a lot of ground to cover. So Byron Belitsos is an award-winning publisher and author and editor of many acclaimed books, including 5 related to Urantia Revelation, The Center Within, One World Democracy, The Adventure of Being Human, and most recently, Your Evolving Soul. He is a winner of the Nautilus Silver Award in Religion and Truths About Evil, Sin, and the Demonic. Byron is a Christian mystic as well as a leading exponent of the Urantia Book. Byron has spoken widely on Urantia, cosmology, and spirituality, including appearances on Gaia MTV, I think it's now called Gaia, and Coast to Coast Radio. He holds a BA in intellectual history from the University of Chicago. His graduate studies earlier in his career embraced psychology, history, and religious studies, and he is now a student of systemic theology at Union Theological Seminary. He was also an inaugural member of Ken Wilber's Integral Institute. So before I turn the talking stick over to you, Byron, I just want to say that, yes, we met Byron through the Birth 2012 movement with Marx Hubbard. And Byron published the newsletter there, and he did a lot of other stuff that we didn't know anything else about. And Byron, I don't know if you remember this, but you invited us in 2013 to go to Burning Man with you.
I forgot.
And
I should have come. Yeah. Not too late.
We had that brand new truck and that beautiful RV, and someone told us You take that out there to the desert and they'll never be the same.
No, that's for sure.
So I don't know if you've been out there since 2013, Byron, but maybe we'll get a rain check.
All right. Maybe we go next year, the three of us.
Yeah, that'd be awesome. Now that you're a veteran, so you can guide us. So without any further ado, Byron, I know you have a lot of ground to cover. I just ask people, please put your questions and comments. Byron is going to have 2 Q&A periods. So please get your notebook and paper out, right, or put it in the chat. There's a lot to cover. So without any further ado, Byron, I'm removing my spotlight and turning it over to you, my friend.
Thank you so much, Noel. And I learned a long time ago that Bob and Noel are amazing co-creators. And they were, they really stood out as really the most supportive of Barbara's mission that I encountered. And I was working closely with Barbara back in the day, 2011, 2012, around that period when I was working with the Shift Network. Some of you know about the Shift Network, and Barbara was one of the primary teachers there. And I had been hired to create a publishing arm of the Shift Network, and our first book, I think, was Barbara's new book. And that was quite a thing, because I've been hearing about Barbara since the 70s, and so I was thrilled to work with Barbara and get to know her and her family and her friends, people like Bob and Noel. So it's an honor to be back into her community. I kind of drifted away into other activities, and so I'm just very pleased to see my friends and colleagues who are part of that stream, very important, very significant stream that Barbara created. And really, we ought to just tip a hat to Barbara for creating this channels of grace, really, that we're all experiencing. So thank you to Barbara, thanks to Bob and Noel, and thank you to the authors of the Urantia book, who are the kind of the heroes we're going to talk about tonight. Heroes in a sense that superhumans can be heroes, like they're superheroes. These are, we believe, celestial beings who were ordained to create a revelatory text for the modern age. That's what Urantia folks believe. And I guess you can say it's something like A Course in Miracles, which most people know about, and fewer know about the Urantia book. It's a big book, just like The Course in Miracles. And but there's nothing wrong with a big book. It's a big universe, and evolution is a huge topic. And like Barbara's work, the Urantia book is it's very much about evolution, the evolution of all things. All levels, but more than that as well, the transcendent level, which is non-evolutional as well. It's a revelation, we think, of the transcendent realms that clarifies a great deal about that. But it's also revelatory about evolution and about the laws of evolution, the nature of evolution. And that's where it touches a lot on Barbara's work. And some of you know that Barbara got interested in the Urantia book because of me and a few friends I introduced to Barbara, and she got into dialogue with us, and she knew about the Urantia book, but she'd never been close to anybody. So I was her editor and her publisher for her book, Birth 2012. And that was months of real constant back and forth with Barbara. So she slowly began to ask me about my work, about the Urantia book. So she got so interested that she came to the International Urantia Conference, where I got her a speaking engagement, a plenary speaking engagement, where it was absolutely adorable to have her there. She was now mid-80s, and everybody just like fawned over her, and she got up there and in front of a large group of people at the University of Denver, where this was going on, and began to give a talk about her impressions about the Urantia book. But partway through the talk, she looked up in the audience and she saw me up there, and she said, "Byron, come down here to the front to help me present this since I don't know it well enough. So I had to come down to the front of the auditorium, and I kind of picked up the thread of each thing she said and added things. I added things in the light of Barbara's work to show how Barbara's work connects to the Urantia book and where it is maybe discontinuous with the Urantia book. And I think one of the ways it was different is in the fact that the Urantia book is a massive revelation about deity itself, not just evolving deity, which of course we know from Teilhard de Chardin is deity is evolving and deity is temporal in the sense that we learn from Barbara, but also that deity is utterly transcendent and of course infinitely loving and omniscient, and yet at the same time personal. So personal for you and for me, personally knows us, loves us, which sounds implausible because how could God know all of that? Well, by definition, God can know all of that because God is infinite. So the Urantia book gets you to take the infinite aspect of deity more seriously than any teaching, more than any scripture, I think, including Islam, Christianity, Buddhism. You get a much bigger field of depth of the understanding of what that is. And so we're going to do a little meditation to try to illustrate that here. So it's sort of something like this. It's like the power of now in the sense that we're present to now in our meditation. We're coming into the present moment in order to encounter the perfection of the present moment and existentially be part of the present. But what actually, aside from our sensory input and our thoughts and feelings, what else is present? So, generally the world's religions say, well, God is present, something like that, or the absolute, or Buddha is present to us. And that's a big thing to think about because, again, if deity is present to every person, then it must be an awfully big God because it's not just humans on this planet, it's humans throughout the universe, maybe billions of inhabited planets. And so God, the Father, Mother God, is present to all of them. That's saying a lot. And so that's the infinitude, but it's more than a force, right? That's present to us. An impersonal force that's divine and beautiful and true and good. There's that, but there's also something additional, which is the loving presence, which is a presence that literally knows you better than you do, and in fact is indwelling you as part of you. And we're going to get into what that means. But for now, I would like to invite you to just do some stillness, what I call stillness meditation. I'm going to give a little bit of guidance to follow for the way I do it as a Urantia student, and you can use it as you wish. So the idea here is like with any meditation is relaxing yourself to the maximum amount while staying sitting up erect and staying at attention and alert while as relaxed as you can be. And if you'd like to close your eyes, you may do that. And in doing that, and sort of tuning out a little bit from your worldly experience, would like you to try to sense not only the presence of nowness, but the presence of something that knows you infinitely well. Not only knows you perfectly well, but loves you in the sense that this infinite being has a plan for you, for your life, including your eternal life, and is working out that plan in the details of the moment. This very moment, you are becoming attuned to the will of this creator deity, the will that this deity has for you. In other words, it has infinite knowledge of you, actually dwells within you, and knows you in perfection, and is able to guide you right now. So let's take some time to tune into what this guidance might be, and that's only known in quiet, in stillness, in relaxation, in open-heartedness, to receive this presence, this divine presence that is there for you, to confer grace on your life, to guide your relationships, to guide you into prosperity, into health. And it's always there. The problem is that we're not open enough for this lovely presence. So let's take a minute or so to tune into that. I'll close my eyes with you. And if you like, focus on the out breath as your breath goes out to help you focus. Letting your thoughts come and go. Let everything be as it is. Let it be just as it is. Let it be as it is. And now try to tune a little bit deeper to a kind of a flavor, the flavor of this experience. And in that flavor, let something very sweet come in. You can imagine that an infinite loving God is trying to reach you. By imagining that this loving, infinite God is trying to reach you, by imagining it, you create the opening in your heart to actually be touched. So now open that place in your heart to be touched. This energy of grace that envelops you now. Let it envelop your body from your toes to your top of your head. Let it flow in. So this is the grace of God within you. And let's give that half a minute. Hey everybody, thank you so much for being part of this short experiment in receiving grace, which I'm sure most of you do anyway. There's a little extra twist from the Urantia Book's teaching and theology and cosmology, which really serves to show that the kinds of grace that are available are different according to the requirement. And that in the Urantia teaching maps into the nature of deity itself. So we learn from the Urantia book, in part one of this big fat book, is on the theology and cosmology of the universe. And why is this so, in depth and so lengthy? Is because it's a vast revelation for humankind, which is suffering. We're suffering such that we need a compensatory gift. It's what I like to call it. That the Urantia Book compensates for the suffering and evils that we are experiencing. It is, in an odd way, like an insurance policy that we're cashing in. That if things go wrong, you get a check from the insurance company, you might say. Well, it actually is what happens. And the Urantia Book is like a check from the universe with a resource that we've earned. And why is that? It's because our planet Earth, according to the Urantia Revelation, is an unusual planet. Other planets that are inhabited, and there's like zillions of them, really. It says that there are 7 trillion inhabited planets, according to the Urantia Book, across, billions of galaxies. That the normal planet does not have something like the war in Gaza. It doesn't have, 250,000 men being killed in Ukraine for a kind of a useless war. It doesn't have, something like the war on terror, which killed over 1 million people. It doesn't have 9/11. It doesn't have Hiroshimas. It doesn't have Holocausts. These are not normal activities on a planet. Our planet has these kinds of evils because of its unusual history. So this is one of the reasons the Urantia Book is lengthy, is to explain this history to us and then tell us what kind of God is there holding us up despite these sufferings and evils that we experience. So you may think, well, what kind of God would allow the Holocaust, or the Vietnam War, or these awful events in Gaza and in Israel? What kind of God allows that sort of thing? The war in Syria, which killed 20,000 children. Well, these are important questions, and the Urantia Book actually answers those kinds of questions, which I've put into a book. This book here is my latest work. I'm no longer in a seminary. I got out. I published my thesis as a book about evil. That's why I'm talking about evil, I guess, and about how we need the Urantia Book along with other scriptures to explain these evils and explain why we're facing such dire circumstances on our planet right now, that climate change and warfare and all the issues that are coming up so fast that our heads are spinning by all these difficulties. So the Urantia Book is the best manual I can find for explaining this. So let me backtrack a little bit and get back to the deity conception of the Urantia Book. So this is somewhat like Barbara's view, right? That Christianity, for example, or Islam, there's a deity, God, at the center of all things, who basically is in control. Number one. Number two is all loving. And that's a wonderful thing, except when those conceptions came through, nobody knew about evolution. Nobody knew a thing about it. Not even Plato. It was not understood that the universe evolves. And so that didn't really come across till the 18th century. So the scriptures are kind of wrong in the sense that the scriptures are not talking about evolution of consciousness. They allude to it, but they don't explicitly tell us about it. And that was one of Barbara Marx Hubbard's, main contributions, is to really bring that forward, unlike anybody else. and bring it to all of us, not just that you had to read Teilhard de Chardin or that you had to read Whitehead or something difficult. She brought it forward. So the Urantia book is doing that, but again, as I said before, it's got a kind of a multiverse conception, which is that there's the evolving universe. All these galaxies and planets are evolving. They're temporal, they're space-time entities. But the Urantia book says that there's a central universe, a central mother universe. The central universe is the source of all universes. So the central universe has no source, it is the source. The central universe has been there from eternity. The center of all things is called the central universe. So deity is actually there. Sort of that's the address of God, is the center of all things. People like Einstein looked at ideas like that, for example, and Einstein really thought it'd be absolutely fabulous if the universe had a center to it. But he couldn't accept it. It was too sort of perfect, geometrically like unlikely, given what the observations, which kind of a chaotic universe out there. And with, quasars and, supernovas and all these stars in formation and so many different changes are going on constantly in the universe. That was not what Einstein and others thought was the case, that the universe could have a center to it. But then again, these are the same people that said there was a Big Bang, right? So what does the Big Bang come from? Well, the Big Bang doesn't come from the left side of the universe or the right side. It comes from the center of the universe, right? So everything comes out from a center, so to speak. But the center is outside of space and time in that theory. And the same in the Urantia book. The Urantia book says that the center of all things, we call it a center because we're in evolutionary temporal space-time existence. So we can relate to a geometric center. But the center of the universe in the Urantia book is actually a singularity out of which all things come, like the Big Bang. But it's not just this force. So those who believe in a force at the center of all things, not a creative deity, but as a great force that causes the Big Bang, we don't think of them as theists. They're not really theists. They're materialists. It comes from this material explosion. But a better conception is a multi-level conception, right? It's not just matter. It's minds, it's hearts, it's spirit, it's beings, living, breathing beings all over the universe. And something material can't give birth to a loving 20-year-old mother who's loving her infant. That doesn't come from a Big Bang solely, from some physical. It comes from a creator deity of some kind. So what I guess I'm trying to get across in brief is that in the Urantia book, the creator deity is personal and super-personal and impersonal all at the same time. So if you look at me, I'm a person, I have personality, I have consciousness, I have will. God cannot be less than that. If God is a source, God can't be less than personal, in the sense that God is the creator of persons, is the source of persons. It's the source of all things, all beings. So God can't be less than what results from deity's action, from divine action. So God must be at least personal, but God is also utterly transcendent to the personal. And this is where we get the conception of a threefold God. So God the Father, the Mother, the source deity, is transcendent to all things, but is kind of trapped in infinity. Think of that deity is infinite, but in this conception, if you have infinity on all sides, you have no differentiation. You just have this infinite field you might say. So the idea of God in the Urantia book is that God in eternity decided to differentiate God from God's self. And that differentiation led to the Son of God, right? So God's own gift gives birth to a perfect other being, which is God the Son. So now you have God has stepped outside of God's self, so God is aware of God's presence, so to speak, through this Son. So the two are in a kind of fusion marriage where they're one, but they're different. They're two at the same time. But in their relationship gives birth to a third. So this is like the old Christian idea of the Trinity. The third is the relationship. So the relationship is a third person, a third entity. So a Trinitarian God is at the heart of our spirituality for Urantia people, because the stillness meditation that we did brings you in contact with the infinite, all-pervading Father, Mother, Source. That's what that's for. But another kind of spirituality is interpersonal, and that gets us in touch with God the Son. That relationship is with a person, because you can't have a relationship with a rock. Rocks can't talk to you and experience you. You know, the blue sky doesn't experience you and talk to you. And so there has to be a way of being equal to another, a peer, and that peer relationship has love. And it's about knowing the other, being with the other. And then that relationship gives birth to a kind of child, you might say, which in Christianity is called the Holy Spirit. Holy Spirit is the personification of the two together. It represents the infinite God the Father and the infinite person. God the Son is the infinite person, and their conjoint action together is them in the universe spreading out into space and time. And that is why we have space and time, because that's a place for deity to have experiences with other personalities. So through this Trinity, we see the birth of space and time, the birth of persons that are like mini gods, like small gods. They're created by the gods to have experience. And as Barbara Marx Hubbard would point out, this experience that we're having in space-time universe is cumulative. It's cumulative. We're experiencing the universe and bringing consciousness to it. Eventually, conscious evolution. That's what we're doing. But why are we doing this? And the Urantia book gives an answer to that, and that'll be in our second half. So I'm going to stop here. I've said a lot of stuff, a lot of new things, perhaps, maybe not, but I want to take some questions or comments. So Noel, if you're ready for that.
Yeah, we do have some questions here. Let me just go back up. The first is, what do you mean by grace? I think that was right after the meditation. So I'm just going to take them in chronological order.
Great question. Well, grace is not that different from the Christian conception, and grace really is a more general term, meaning love of God bestowed on you as an individual or on a group for your greater good. Right? So really that all situations that we encounter, the role of deity is grace, really. Deity is trying to enhance the situation so that we humans or angels have an enhancement of conscious evolution, really. It is the fuel for conscious evolution. Because like today I had kind of a letdown in something. a disappointment, and I had to like have some time with prayer and meditation, and I was reminded that's part of evolution, and now you've learned something new, and the grace of that was the actual teaching that I received in my meditation, which I am here, I love you, it's moving forward, your setbacks are actually for the greater good. So grace is always that which is pointing you into the greater good, or is actually sometimes real grace in meditation is pervading good. It pervades you, your body, mind, heart, and that's the best kind of grace.
Great. All right. I really like that. I always say everything's for my good, the good, the bad, the ugly. I just have to figure out how to accept that.
Yep.
Another question here. What does the Urantia book have to say about the existence of evil? And is that, what did you say? There are 7 trillion different
Inhabited worlds. Yeah.
inhabited worlds.
Right.
Okay, so, and does evil exist there on these other worlds?
Great question. And you come to the right place on that one, since I'd spent 4 years writing a book about evil.
We did put the book in the chat, so.
So, and it just came out. So again, the book is called Truths About Evil, Sin, and the Demonic. Truths about evil, sin, and the demonic. So evil is different than sin, which might take you back to Sunday school or something when everybody was saying you're a sinner. Remember, if you're my age, you grew up hearing about that. And then the demonic is sin, sin embraced. So let's move through that. So the Urantia definition of this builds on the Christian Muslim Abrahamic tradition, which is deity has a will and deity loves us, but we have free will, right? We have free will, and that's kind of the whole point of conscious evolution, because if it wasn't for our freedom, we wouldn't be consciously evolving, we would be robots evolving, right? So we have to choose the forward motion of consciousness. But the evil side of that is that we're given teachings, we're given revelations that basically give you the morality of how things should be. You should be treating others the way you want to be treated. That's kind of basic, right? So those teachings are in all religions, and those religions are gifted, more or less gifted to us. They're gifted to us by Spirit. Spirit's giving you ABCs. Spirit is giving you Sunday school. It's telling you love is the source of all things. So, but hey, you're free, and you don't have to choose love. You can choose self. Well, if you do that, you'll have consequences eventually, right? Maybe not right away, but eventually there'll be some suffering. So the suffering that you experience is evil, is situations in which you're suffering. Suffering is a result of evil. So it's an abstract idea, but it gets real when you're suffering. So the two come together. And so suffering is sort of the feedback from evil. But it's also feedback from evolution, because evolution is not, we're not perfect yet, right? So, as Barbara pointed out to us, in many ways, evolution is moving toward the omega, right? To the fulfillment, to its perfection. So on the way to it, we're not perfect. And if you're not perfect, then you always can fall into evil. And so the Urantia book definition of evil is a little bit different. Basically, everybody's in a kind of state where evil is always potential, always there for, you can always make the choice of not telling the cashier that they gave you $5 more than you were supposed to get back. You don't have to make that choice, right? So you're not forced to do that. So you fall into evil, but then you correct yourself. But evil where you're not self-correcting is sin.
Oh, no, there you go.
So people who commit evils usually figure out how to correct or make amends, and they get back on the right path. But a sinner is somebody who persistently does that
Okay.
for selfish reasons or for other reasons that have to do with mental derangement or
Or political reasons.
right. So I want to go one more dimension, and that's the demonic.
Mhm.
So the demonic is sin systematized.
Mhm.
So when you get to that level, you get to why our planet is worse than other planets, because we had a rebellion, and everybody needs to know this. The Urantia Book is one of its key teachings is that we're a rebellion planet. Now that's biblical. It's also in Islam and other sources that in primeval times there was a rebellion of the angels. So the so-called Lucifer rebellion. And so the Urantia Book is kind of bizarre because it alludes to old doctrines of the devil that we thought we were past all that. But the Urantia Book says, no, there really was such a thing, but it modernizes that. Right? So the Bible is a mythic conception. The Urantia Book is a modern conception of why we are kind of an evil planet, why we have things like the Holocaust. And without an explanation like that, you could easily fall into being a totally secular person. Most of my friends that are non-theistic or secular, it's because of evil. It's because there's too much evil. There's too much suffering. How could there be a God? So this is important, and we'll return to it.
Okay, and Bong is asking on evil, sin, and iniquity. Is demonic same as iniquity?
Yes, demonic is a little bit more vivid way of saying iniquity.
Okay.
Right. Thanks,
All
Bob.
right. Okay. I want to back up and just kind of give us I'm a more linear thinker. How did this Urantia book? You say it's from the Celestials. Give us a little bit about how it came about to be, and you also said we're very different planet. I mean, aren't we like one of like 37 planets out of all these trillions that have this system? So give us a little bit of background that way, and I'm going to take myself off. I'll just let you run with that, and then go on from there.
I'll
However
go
you
from
want.
there. Yeah, so the 37 planets is the number of planets that joined the Lucifer rebellion. You know, and it's kind of like sounds like a horror film or something, that there was a rebellion of 37 planets, and that's one of the more difficult things to swallow from the Rand book. Sounds like science fiction, but this is something that happens in 1 in a million cases, where there's a little bit of margin where the angelic host of a planet can go to the dark side. They have free will as well. Yes, they are guided more closely by spirit, but they're not perfect. So that's why we have a demonic aspect of our planet. And these other planets are also known as rebellion planets. Lucifer was the chief angel of the local group of inhabited planets, of which there are 1,000. So let's back up on the question of where does the Urantia Book come from? Well, the Urantia Book comes from beings who are trying to explain our dilemma, the dilemma of a rebellion planet that we are, in ways we can get that are non-mythical, like the Bible is mythic, although profound. And the Bible does, I think, a really, really great job being, from archaic times, it's still very profound. So imagine that the Bible is being updated for our time, and so we need a new revelation. So how did this thing come through? So let me get into that a bit. So the Urantia Book was scheduled to occur in the 20th century, waiting for humans to be ready for a modern explanation of things versus a mythic explanation of things. So humans were ready really by the 19th century. We had science. And once you have enough science in the mentality of a culture, then you're ready for modern life. So the Urantia book is for post-Einstein culture. So once you have rationality in terms of science, then you can learn about the bigger universe out there, which is, really is like Star Trek. It's like these very advanced worlds that have advanced science, advanced spirituality, advanced education, advanced everything. So we're coming into that universe, and we need to know why we're tardy, why we're kind of retarded. So the beings that did this approached some folks in Chicago around 1910, and in particular, a well-known psychiatrist who taught at the University of Chicago and was also a trained physician and as well as psychiatrist, who was a guy that actually tried to debunk channeling. Back then, there was a lot of channeling, you may know. There was a whole movement of channeling. He actually was a debunker of that because he was a highly trained scientist and an early student of Freud. So he was very scientifically minded, and he didn't think there could be such a thing as channeling necessarily. So they actually chose that guy to channel the Urantia book. So imagine that. He was a tough guy to convince, right? So what it happens is the case is that the Urantia book is not channeled. It actually was more or less materialized. So it's not quite like Course in Miracles, which was technically channeled through Helen Schuckman. She wrote it down in a conscious state, and the Urantia book did not come from a person in that way. It is not exactly known. I just published a book which covers that. If anybody wants to know about it, it's called, oops. It's actually a book for scholars. Want to look into the Urantia book, where it came from, and that sort of thing. So the papers, we call them papers of the Urantia book, more or less materialized in the presence of Sadler and his group, who became the Contact Group. This group would receive these papers through more or less miraculous means. And they would read them, and then the beings would have conversations. So the conversations the beings had were channeled. So there was channeled back and forth with invisible beings who would query them about the chapters. They're called papers. Did you understand this? Did you understand that? And feed some questions back to us. So over 20 years, each chapter or paper would appear, they would ask questions, and then they would edit it, and in a new chapter, a new version of that chapter, a new edition of that would appear. So there are multiple editions over 20 plus years, and there are about 400 people who are reading it pretty much secretly, and they completed it at the end of World War II, 1945, and it took 10 years before they got an okay to publish it. So it is not truly a channeled book. It is a miraculously appearing text, but there was channeling all around it. But when you read it, you can tell nobody can channel like this. There's no way any human being can channel something of that sophistication. It's impossible, in my view. And I've been on this for 50 years. I've been studying it since 1974. So I hope I answered that question about its source, but I've just published a whole book about it. Well, you're muted.
There we go. I do have one more question from Rita, and she says, how does Urantia book relate or speak about the indigenous understanding of the concept of the creator as the source of all that is?
Yeah, so I mean, it is pretty much in agreement with indigenous notions of a source of all things. But remember, you know, the indigenous folks were prior to the modern world, prior to the evolution of consciousness through stages. So things have evolved since those times of the indigenous people of the earth. And of course, the indigenous people evolved with it, and they became the civilizations of the earth, right? But those who remained in those more indigenous domains may or may not have evolved with technology and science. So it depends on which ones you mean. But yeah, this is a source of all things. But the issue for us, especially in the light of the evils that we're facing, is this source know about us? Is the source conscious of us? So if it's just a source is not aware of you. It's just there as the source of, like, the Big Bang. But does this source love you? That's the question, the spiritual and philosophical question we all have to answer. The Urantia book gives the most elaborate answer I've seen, and it answers my questions and has for my whole adult life. So I hope I answered that. We have another half hour, and I'm going to wrap up. And first, I want to invite you to get a more experiential flavor of the things I'm talking about. I'm more of a pundit type, but my friend Donna D'Angelo, who spoke last time, is my collaborator and longtime friend, and I published her 3 books. And I want to put in a special pitch for her because she has a mastery of the experiential side of the Urantia teaching like nobody else. And so if this appeals to you, get her most recent book, which I did publish also, which she talked about last time, which is The Women Who Love Jesus. I published a lot of books. I published Barbara Marx Hubbard, one of her books. This book by Donna is the most inspiring book I've ever been involved with. It's just pure inspiration. It's the women from heaven channeling to Donna their story. These are the women who are the apostles with Jesus. They're the female apostles. So the Urantia book has many revelations about Jesus. So I didn't get enough into that. So let me cover that, and then we'll have Q&A. So part 4 of the Urantia book, you know, all this highfalutin stuff I've been talking about is part 1, 2, and 3. But part 4 is what everybody should read. I mean, even if you're deeply skeptical, try to pick it up and read. Part 4 is the life and teachings of Jesus. Vastly more high quality than you get in the New Testament. Much more detail. So if you love Jesus or anything about Jesus, part 4 is 750 plus pages of Jesus. And it's the details of his life that are like 100-fold more than what's in the Bible. I love the Gospels of the Bible. They're great literature. They're great stories. So imagine a modern enhancement of that that's 50 to 100 times, you know, like the wedding at Cana is like this much in the Bible. And it's a whole chapter in the Urantia book. Everything you can think of, you know, the missing years of Jesus are in the Urantia book. It is so fun to read about the missing years of Jesus in the Urantia book. What happened at the end of his life? What was really the way he died, and how the crucifixion occurred, and what it really, really meant, and was there really a resurrection? The Urantia book says there really was a resurrection. All these things are in much more detail and much more modern than the Bible. You don't have to swallow, you know, mythic ideas that are from the pre-modern ancient era. You don't have to take that stuff with the life of Jesus, story of Jesus. The story of Jesus is universal for all time. It's not just for 2,000 years ago. And by the way, the life of Jesus is known on all planets in the local universe, because the Urantia book teaches that Jesus is not the Son of God, literally, but is of origin from the Son and the Father, and is sent to our local universe of 10 million inhabited planets. So a unit of planets of 10 million inhabited planets has its own deity. And I think Donna explained this to you last time. That is the sort of what we call local deity. And this is deity in space and time. So again, back to Barbara's notion of conscious evolution. Deity comes into space-time as an act of grace, right? Deity creates space and time. The indigenous people tell us God is the source of all things, but doesn't just stand back and let things be in evolution, but comes into the evolving world as an act of love and grace and mercy. And so Christ is deity in our local universe as our local creator, and, as Donna pointed out, has a female consort. Is another big revelation of the Urantia book, is that there's a female aspect of deity. The female aspect of deity is known as the Mother Spirit. And the Mother Spirit is of origin from the third person of the Trinity, which in a way is the mother aspect of God. She comes out from there, from the central universe, into space-time as the consort of Christ, our creator. She too is a creator. She's a co-creator with Christ, and we are co-creators with them. So Barbara had this exactly right. There were co-creators, and it literally is a truism of the Urantia book, which is why Marx Hubbard came to this Urantia event and gave a keynote. She recognized this is a co-creative text like none other. But it's got depths to it that are new, that there's a feminine Jesus, you might say. There's a divine feminine consort to Jesus, like Hyros Gamos, as they call that. The two together are our creators, male and female. And they not only create us and our world, our planet, but the angels as well. So the angels that surround us are our creators, and these angels foster us in this life and in the afterlife. So I want to conclude with a little bit about the afterlife.
Sure.
So the Urantia book is a massive revelation about future life. There is nothing close to it in world literature, and I spent my life on this. I just got a theological degree looking at this question. There's nothing close to the Urantia book in terms of its revelation of the higher worlds. You know, Rudolf Steiner had a lot on this, but the Urantia book makes much more sense than Steiner's view, or Edgar Cayce and others. It's much more coherent. And what it depicts is that your future life, you're here for soul growth, and you're going to be engaged in soul growth for the rest of eternity in the higher worlds. And these higher worlds are not like floating and playing harps. They're worlds, they're spheres, but they're in higher dimensions. And in these higher worlds, we experience higher things. But we're always going to be fondly looking back on our life on Earth and at the hard knocks that we got down here. These hard knocks that we got here are there to get us, to shape us up for the future life, to test us, to see, are we really interested in eternal life? Are we willing, to go into an eternal future of eternal life? Not just like, you die and just go to God. That is a primitive idea. You die and you're still evolving. You're evolving. Everything's evolving in the afterlife. You're growing vastly beyond where you are today. It's an almost infinite horizon of growth, the inconceivable growth in the afterlife, and described in great detail in the Urantia book, until you move out, going through your galaxy, the higher dimensions of your galaxy, in the afterlife, right? So the galaxy itself, Milky Way, is the setting for your future life, but it's higher dimensions. You're going to graduate from the galaxy to go to higher, actually the clusters of galaxy, they're higher realms of galactic life, until in the far distant future, you're going to come out of space-time, your conscious evolution will be completed in the temporal domains. And you're going to go into the central universe. Remember I said there's a center of all things, which is populated. It's a domain of perfect life. You will be the perfecting co-creator. You're a co-creator, and you're going to be perfected when you are admitted to the central universe. The central universe is the eternal domain. You're going to go there, and you're going to dwell there, and you're going to experience things vastly beyond our imagination, and you're going to be in the very presence of deity, of the source deity, with trillions of other beings who have ascended to the center of all things. Then you're assigned in other domain. Actually, they're sent out to galaxies that are uninhabited, and we're going to be in those galaxies as co-creators who've perfected themselves. So you have an eternal future in this grand universe. So I think that would conclude things, and we have about 20 minutes, and
Okay.
have some more discussion.
All right. Well, we have another question. Is this female co-creator the Sophia as referenced in many texts?
Yeah, this is the Sophia as intuited in ancient Christian mysticism and Russian mysticism, in particular in the 19th century, the Sophiologists. And she was giving an intuition to them about her presence. Of course, she gave it to the Catholics because they started to deify Mary, right? Mary was deified to become the same being. Really, it's not Mother Mary. It's a deity who's feminine. So Catholics have it as well. So do Buddhists. They have a female deity, Buddha, as well. So yes, Sophia is a good name for her.
Okay, and let's see here. I don't see any questions right now. Oh, here comes some. Bong says, I love it that you mentioned NDE in your Evolving Soul book. My question is, were they describing mansions, world one? Why are there still roaming souls after death that are seen by people with third eye?
Yeah, there's a lot of parts to that. Let's see here. So I'm glad you noted my book on. I didn't say much about that, so let me give just a little bit of background about the
Sure.
book. So the Urantia book states that there are three parts of each person. I call it the inner triad. So there's the soul, which is distinct from the spirit, and that's distinct from the mind. So the three substances. The spirit is, remember at the outset, we were talking about God indwelling you, which is the most important principle. But God indwells you as your personhood, the image of God, and as a spirit, which is a fragment of deity. And it's working through your decisions to create the new you. That's your soul. So the soul is the record of your life experiences that are worthy of being eternal. So every good thing you do, or every important experience, is saved. It's like part of you hits a save button. It saves an experience, literally saves that experience. And it's like the Akashic record, but only for your salvageable experiences. So it doesn't save your experience of choosing to get a hot dog instead of a hamburger. That's not soul worthy, right? But if you gave the hot dog to a friend as a kind gesture, it saves that. That literally saves anything loving you do or anything truthful you do. It saves it in a record called the soul. The soul is the evolving part. The spirit in you does not evolve. So very important to get this distinction.
That's good.
Now, the NDE part of this is as follows. The NDE experience, according to the Urantia book, is, or according to me, my interpretation, we're being given NDE so we can understand this issue. So we can know that there's a life review when you get to what the Urantia book calls the first level of heaven. You're going to do a life review. Your soul is going to show you all of the things you experienced for your self-knowledge, to become a more conscious co-creator. You need to know yourself. So your soul is going to become present. And that's what happens in these NDEs. So I hope I answered that question.
Well, that's so what about okay, do we have a choice about coming back? Because
Right. So great question. I'm glad you asked that one. It's very important. So the Urantia book is not a reincarnation cosmology. It does not necessarily exclude that. It's an area of controversy with the Urantia text. So the notion of reincarnation, which is really of origin more in Hinduism and Eastern teaching, is not native to the Urantia book or even to the Abrahamic tradition. Right? So Islam doesn't have reincarnation. Christianity doesn't teach reincarnation unless it's very esoteric, right? So the Urantia book is in that lineage, that we're here to ascend, not to come back. Why would you need to come back? You would need to come back if you would need that conception if you don't think there's anything up there. You can grow.
So what about the people who say they've had all these past lives?
So the Urantia book, and I've written a whole thing on this. The memory of past life, according to the Urantia book, is not necessarily your past life. It is that you have tapped into the domain of the record of past lives, which is we'll just leave it there, that it's not necessarily your past. So we do not have a reincarnation. So if you're really married to that idea, the Urantia book will seem strange, but it doesn't exclude that. It just doesn't, it's not the center of its idea of the afterlife.
Oh, that must have been one of the papers they forgot to talk about. Okay, quick question here. Does Urantia reference the Essenes by any chance?
A little bit, but it is not, its teachings are not Essene teachings. Its teachings are Jesus as an ordinary person who did not have that type of training, although I believe it states that, that John the Baptist had Essene training, but Jesus didn't need to. Jesus is not really a evolutionary human only. He's incarnate deity in a human life, so it is the Christian conception of man and God in one person. So he doesn't need to be in training by the Essenes.
Okay. We have that question answered. Let me see if I have another one here.
This one from Sheila. Why don't you ask your question directly?
You'd have to unmute. Yeah. Go ahead, Sheila.
I was told about the Urantia book back, I think, in the 80s, actually. And when I bought it, I had to go to the Moody Bible Institute to order it.
Oh, dear.
Do you know about that? Did you hear about that? How
Hear
can that
about
be? How in the world did the Moody Bible Institute get connected to the Urantia book?
they're not connected. It's just a fluke. No,
Okay.
they're not involved with that because it's
Okay.
the Moody people. Yeah, that's a fluke. You must have been in Chicago at the time.
And it's just where I was able to get it. So I ordered it.
That's very odd.
Okay.
Yeah, anyway. Yeah, there was a time when it was not easily available for whatever reason. Anything else? I think I see someone I know.
We have another question here from Rita. How does the Urantia book relate or speak about? Oh, we already did that one about the indigenous. Sorry about that. I thought we had another one there. And let's see, Bob, someone would like to get Byron. Byron, is it okay if someone emails you or does it contacts you? I know you're a busy guy. So is that?
Yeah, sure. Byron at Origin Press, ORIGIN, originpress.com.
Origin Press. Okay, and so Robert Munz has just joined us, and I don't know if he wants to talk, but he has read the Urantia book, and he says the principle of reincarnation still exists, though in the continued advancement in the mansion worlds and beyond. So because
Yeah.
I've not read everything in the Urantia book, I just fell in love with the Jesus book. So if you haven't, I don't know if that can you see that one? No.
No, can't see.
No, we can't.
Okay.
Yeah, the reincarnation at higher levels, yes. Future lives that go on forever, basically. And you at a higher level of vibration, you get a new body. But coming back here, it's like somebody saying, "Oh, you got to go back to first grade now." It's not, doesn't make a whole lot of sense to have the entire universe reincarnating back on their planets.
Okay. And how about the lords of karma? How do they fit into this thought system, this belief system?
Lords of karma?
Yeah, lords of karma.
I certainly heard of karma. I don't know what the lords of karma would be.
But they're supposed to be up there doing stuff.
It's the entity that makes
Okay,
sure.
let's say karma then.
Yeah, karma. I mean, karma is a great concept. It's very vague. Actually, there's a lot of definitions of karma. So I'll just guess that there is a kind of a what goes around comes around notion, right? And so I'd say the Urantia book agrees with that, but it's a big discussion.
Okay. All right, Linda, if you want to unmute. And if anyone else wants to raise their hand after Linda, you're more than welcome.
Okay, so hello, Byron. It's interesting to hear you speak about Urantia. I have a question. I've recently, within the past several years, gotten associated with an eco-spiritual community in Italy called Damanhur.
Oh,
You may
wow.
or may not be familiar.
Sure.
Yeah. So one of the things that they talk about in Damanhur is a soul that moves through different lives. And you are talking about souls being the, or at least what I'm understanding, being the operative word for us evolving. Yeah. Okay. So can you speak to this idea of you definitely wouldn't come back, because there's this sense that we come back to learn different things and to evolve in different ways. And so I'm curious about how the Urantia books, or how the Urantia philosophy, or however we're going to frame this, speaks to that. So if you would, I would love to hear more about that.
Well, let me try to clarify, and thanks for the question, Linda. So
Sure.
Damanhur says the soul is moving through different lives on Earth, right?
Not necessarily. No.
Where do you experience those lives?
So one of the ideas, without getting into a more complicated definition, is that we come into the world of form, right? But then there is this space-time that exists outside of, and there are personalities that there's a dominant personality that is going to come in, and that dominant personality is a part of the choosing of these personalities for this particular soul mission that they come in for. And so then they come in and they travel on the synchronic lines, and come into being. I don't know if that helps to clarify, but they don't necessarily come to the synchronic lines. Are those highways, those cosmic highways, and it doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to come to Earth, but it may be that they do come to Earth. So I'm curious about hearing more about your ideas about soul and the Urantia books and the interpretation of that.
It's a huge discussion. And each one of the reasons we have difficulty is that we're a rebellion planet. A normal planet has teachings established thousands and thousands of years previous to the scientific era. So you would not come into a scientific era and have things like World War I, World War II, Hiroshima, the Holocaust. You would already have moral civilizations already.
You'd be beyond. So in other words, you would be more evolved than that. Yeah.
Yeah, you wouldn't have barbaric wars like we have in Gaza.
Yeah.
It would not ever happen. So there are all these teachings that are coming to us to try to explain things. And there's hundreds of them. So it's a tough job, to filter them. You spend all your time. And what I look for is something that has coherence across all domains of knowledge: science, religion, philosophy, history, cosmology, psychology. I don't know if Damanhur has that. I've heard great things about it.
Yeah, it tends to do that same thing and has these different laws that kind of adhere to that kind of a context where it is coherent with these other areas, and so that it makes sense. I mean, they talk about a cosmic council, and a person who comes back to the founder of Damanhur, who comes back to help us to have a different timeline so that we don't destroy ourselves. So that, yeah, that we do advance in that more evolved, towards that more evolved state.
I think the question would be, can you take the Damanhur teachings and spread them out to the world? To all the world, to all the continents, all the races, all the countries, and make that the reigning, the teaching that we can build a civilization around. So that's the question. So I think that the Urantia book is better for that, because it's now in 30 languages. It's got a kind of coherence, fits with the world's religions without a jarring new set of, although many jarring new things to Urantia book. I'll take that back, but that it makes us, well, I put it this way: the beings that wrote the Urantia book have come back and are teaching in vast quantities all over the planet. And I published some of those books. I'll just show you one of them.
Okay, can't get it. The Adventure
of Being
Being
Human.
Human. This one.
The
The
Center
Center
Within.
Within.
And this one.
Healing a broken
Healing.
world.
A broken world.
These are the beings who brought through the Urantia book, have come back in the 80s, 90s, and since then have been speed. It's very controversial because it's cosmically enhancing the Urantia book. And
Mhm.
we have 30,000 pages of new teachings, all consistent across 30,000 pages with the Urantia book. So that's something I think is easier to build upon than more specific revelations like Damanhur or say Edgar Cayce.
Mhm. Mhm.
Mhm.
Because you're trying to build rebuild civilization. So you got to ask yourself, can we rebuild, Chinese civilization, West, East, Africa, around Damanhur teachings?
Well, I think it's not so much can you build it around Damanhur teachings. I was more curious about this idea of the soul and the soul's purpose
Yeah.
in the context of what you're referring to. And very honestly, I don't know. I hear what you're saying in terms of it being that the Urantia books are more applicable to or consistent with the whole world and world religions. I don't know that that's the question necessarily, as far as I'm concerned.
Okay.
It's more around a way of evolving within the lifetime that we are in and moving forward in a way that advances consciousness and advances the soul's journey.
For everyone in the world, or for the followers of Damanhur?
No, for anyone. I mean,
Right. So, well, that's great. Then maybe that's what we need. I mean, if it's applicable to every culture,
mhm,
then maybe that is what we need. And the Urantia book can be set aside, or the Bible can be set aside.
mhm.
We'll set aside Buddhist teachings. We'll set aside these things, and we'll follow the Damanhur teachings.
Well,
I'm going to get
I
in a
don't,
few more questions here. We're kind of running out of time, if that's
yeah,
okay.
sorry, I don't mean to dominate at all. I
Okay,
just,
that's
it's
all
a
right.
it's an interesting conversation, and I'm curious, and so I'll be quiet now.
I love you, Linda. Okay, is there a connection with or reference to the White Brotherhood referenced in the Urantia book?
No, there isn't. And it's unclear from the literature what is meant by the White Brotherhood anyway. So
Mhm.
the Urantia book was completed and published in 1955 before the White Brotherhood was known, as far as I can tell.
Okay, and let me see. The other was about reference the books, and I think Bob has put up a link. All your books are available on Amazon, are they not, Byron?
Just look under my name on Amazon, you'll see my books. Yeah.
Yeah, everything's there. And kind of going back to what Linda was saying, what I'm hearing you saying is that the Urantia book is offering us a more comprehensive thought system that we can evolve to versus, something that might be, incorporates a lot of ideas that different religions and things that we have on this planet, but it's going up the way I feel like it's going like bringing in the rest of creation. Whereas we're kind of dealing with this part of creation in our thought system. And I kind of feel like it's bringing in, like, I didn't know there were 37 rebel planets. And I'm just curious now with this talk about the afterlife. I keep on saying I've established the NCB club, which means not coming back club, and I'm going like, get me off this crazy planet. I want to go someplace so where I could spiritually advance, because I do believe that I have to keep climbing Jacob's ladder or whatever to get to that infinite part of being complete, with Creator. But that's just my crazy thoughts.
Yeah, well said, beautifully well said. And I think that's kind of the rationale for something like the Urantia book, or anything that has universal applicable And, I'm open. If there's something better, I'm ready. We need it. And so there is a realm of comparative religion, comparing revelations. Like a bunch of people trying to compare the Urantia book with Course in Miracles.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think that
Question?
I love the Course in Miracles, and I study that because I feel like it's I call it spiritual psychotherapy, because it's just trying to get
What?
my mindset. Go ahead, Bong.
Yeah. The 37 planets that rebelled, Byron, is only in our local universe. How about the other local universes? Did they also, did rebellion happen to them as well?
It's like 1 in a million planets everywhere in the universe. It's just a very small chance because it is an evolving angelic. Angels are evolving. So even angels. So this is an angelic rebellion. It's not a human rebellion. So the Bible depicts it as Adam, the first human rebelling. The Urantia book said that's not true. It's not a human doing it. It's the angels doing it who are in charge of our planet. So it's a very dire thing, right? So the angels in charge of you go to the dark side. That's pretty drastic. But the correction of that is what all the world's religions are, and the presence of Christ is the greatest of all the corrections to the rebellion.
I think that's a good place to complete tonight with that thought. And Byron, so thankful for you being here. And I know I could ask a lot more questions, but you've given us 90 minutes of your precious time. I really appreciate that. And look up the books. Bong, you've obviously read the books. Sheila, Robert, and I tried reading it. Some of it's just like it felt like it was just like.
Well,
So
if it's too much, then read part 4, the life of Jesus.
that's what I was talking about. No, I'm just kidding.
Well, it is more advanced than the New Testament.
Very good.
Anyway, thank you, everyone. It's good to see all of you here, and
Thank you, Byron. Very good.
Adorable. Thank you for coming.
Appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Byron. Thank you,
Yes.
Barbara, for bringing us together.
Yes.
The
Rosemary
origin
says-
moment of all of us being here tonight, at least for Noel and I. So
Sorry
thank
from Barbara Marx Hubbard. Thank you, Barbara.
you.
Thank you.
Let's see.
Bless
Let me get
her
a few
heart.
more things in here. Robert
Oh.
says my questions would take hours.
Thank you.
And Rosemary says new neural pathways are opened. And so you've blown a lot of minds tonight. Congratulations, Byron.
It's a lot of fun. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Thank
Byron. Really
you.
appreciate it. May peace prevail on
Stay in
this
touch.
rebel planet.
May peace prevail on earth. Good night.